Hey stragglers and tourists, my name is TheiPadCat and you're watching the 5th episode of The Last of Us Could Have Been Very Different series, where we reconstruct and discuss one of the original storyboards from the game's development. If you just came across this video, I'd strongly suggest that you watch the series chronologically, because, well, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense if you don't. In this episode, our characters become post-apocalyptic commuters? Wait, what? Anyways.
Let's get on with it.
After getting almost beaten to death by the runner in the old subway tunnel during the spring a few months back, Sam needed a long time to rest and heal. Joel originally intended for him and Ellie to leave as soon as the lucrativeness of their relationship with Henry and Sam had disappeared, which meant the moment they got out of Pittsburgh. But as he sat down with Henry a few of the evenings following their escape, getting to know him better, he actually started to like him. They became friends after a while, at least to the extent Joel was willing to be friends, still being the same brutal survivor inside. They shared stories from before the outbreak, like the one time he and Tommy rode Harleys in Texas. When Henry told Joel he and his brother were also looking to find the Fireflies out west, it only helped keep them together further with a common goal. They hadn't gone to the original planned destination, the barricaded church, yet. While it was only a couple of miles away, there was no reason to gamble away their perfect hiding place at the train, figuring that they could just stop by it along the way out west. Finally, while Henry had focused on tending to Sam, Ellie on reading her books and comics, Joel had tried to figure out how, as efficiently as possible, they could go far west. They needed a vehicle, but they were out in the middle of nowhere. So one day, partly out of curiosity, partly out of being out of ideas, he went up to the locomotive and tried figuring out how it worked, and on accident managed to turn it on. It of course shut down after only a few seconds due to fuel shortage and being very badly maintained. While he didn't know anything about train repairs, they could easily try refueling. The tracks, at least in their proximity, didn't seem all that affected by being exposed to the elements for 20 years without maintenance. So Joel figured that this was the best alternative they had. The tracks even ran by relatively close to the abandoned church, judging by Henry's map, meaning they could just ride the train there. For a few weeks after that, he and Ellie went on scavenging runs for fuel. During one of the runs, though, they ran into a hunter patrol from Pittsburgh, during which Joel for the first time allowed Ellie to carry her own gun and shoot. It was only a small patrol that they overpowered with ease, but what they didn't know was that one of them survived. Today was the day that they were going to leave the run-down old train station and head west, hopefully with the train. During the last few weeks, Ellie had explicitly expressed her doubt over it working multiple times, but was secretly excited over possibly being able to ride a train. Joel walked up the stairs into the driver's cabin, where the others were waiting after having decoupled the car attached to the locomotive and refueling the last of the gas. He asked everyone in a tired voice if they'd got everything, and then proceeded to the moment of truth. Holding his breath, he turned the engine ignition knob, and to everyone's relief, it started. Ellie looked visibly excited, sticking her hand out of the window as they sped up. It wouldn't take long to reach the Fireflies in this, Joel thought. But, as if the world thought it was time to end their good fortune streak, they heard gunfire, and then bullets hitting the train. Looking in the train rearview mirror, he could see a Hunter APC quickly catching up to them, driving beside the tracks. He accelerated as much as possible, but it being a cargo train, it wasn't really meant to be the most speedy one. One of the bullets took out the rearview mirror, leaving them blind to where they were. Joel opened the duffel bag he'd found on a scavenging run with Ellie that had all the guns and ammo stored. He threw Henry a shotgun and Ellie a hunting rifle. Personally, he kept his revolver, but grabbed some more spare ammo. They waited for the hunters to catch up, but they never did. Confused, Joel carefully glanced back out of the window and saw the hunters far off in the distance, slowly following them. When Ellie shouted that they had to stop, he realized that they had fallen straight into their trap. They wanted them to speed up enough to not be able to stop for whatever obstruction they put in the way. He rushed to the controls and pulled the brakes as hard as he could, but it wasn't going to be nearly enough. The destroyed tracks were way too close. He yelled for everyone to hold on tight and brace for impact. Surprisingly enough, the crash, if you could call it that, was much less dramatic than the car crash in Pittsburgh. The train somehow stayed upright, and it was at worst quite bumpy before it ultimately came to a full stop. They still couldn't stop and catch their breath though, because the hunters were closing in behind them. Henry told everyone to take what they could carry and get the hell out of there. Joel grabbed the duffel bag and pushed Ellie in front of him, saying it was time to go, as if she didn't realize that herself. The train had crashed just on the edge of a small suburban town, not all that different from where Joel and Rachel lived all those years ago. There was no time to think about where to go. Cover from being completely out in the open was what mattered. They could hear the Hunter APC pulling up behind the train wreck. Joel took point and ran toward the nearest house. He grabbed Ellie's hunting rifle and used the butt of it to smash through a window. Fortunately, they all got in before the hunters had any sightlines on them. Joel told Henry he had to bring out his map and figure out where they were, as he guarded the window. They needed to get to that barricaded church. There they could make a stand. A few moments later, Henry thought he found where they were, which was a small Pittsburgh suburban town very close to the church. In fact, he told Joel that they should be able to see it if they just could get to the main street intersection, only a couple of 100 meters away. Looking out of the windows, the town seemed abandoned. Boarded up and partially collapsed and overgrown houses were everywhere. But knowing how hunters operate from experience, it might as well be crawling with them. The best course of action would be for one person to go check and for the others to cover them. Joel decided it was going to be him, without consolidating with the others. Simply telling them to cover him, he went out on the decrepit porch, Ellie's hunting rifle in hand.
Alright now, y'all stay here.
No!
Before you start, I need you guys to keep him busy.
Just a few steps out on the street, and fire erupted from several windows in houses down the street. Narrowly escaping with a bullet grazing his shooting arm, he had to get to cover. He had revealed his and the others' position, and now he couldn't fire back. There was no use in hiding anymore, so he yelled for the others to get to his position. He told Henry and Ellie to keep them distracted as he went around to try and take them through close combat. Ellie anxiously told him to be careful as she took the rifle back and started firing down the street. Joel felt his arm pounding. It hurt like hell, but he knew it was easy to fix once they got out of this entire situation. Walking around the back, he managed to strangle a few rear guards until he finally made his way to one of the two houses the hunters were using as firing positions. He could enter sneakily with ease due to the constant gunfire. From what he could gather, there was 4 hunters in the building, one by each street-facing window. His days as a hunter himself paid off now, as he effortlessly disposed of each of them. While the gunfire first worked in his favor, that was now quickly coming to an end. What seemed like dozens of clickers, stalkers, and runners, judging by the sound of it, were pouring into the street from God knows where. He grabbed one of the hunter's rifles for using later and rushed as fast as he could back toward where he left his group. Things had gotten out of hand drastically as the hunters and his group were still fighting against each other, but also against the infected swarming around everywhere. Just a short while later, he reached them, surprisingly still unknown to the infected, or at least for the moment. Joel told everyone they could use that to their advantage to make a run for the church. Henry agreed, and just when they were about to go, being on edge, Ellie shot at a passing clicker, hitting it in the chest. As if it hadn't even been hit at all, the sound and hit just made it and a few others turn toward them. Since they were hiding pretty much immediately next to the stream of infected coming into the town, Henry and Sam, who were sitting the closest to the edge, had no time to react and got pushed to the ground by 2 clickers. Joel and Ellie quickly killed the infected, and Henry asked Sam right away if he was alright. He nodded and said he thought so. Joel responded before Henry could and said that was good, but that they needed to move. Covered by the sound of the hunters' gunfire in their frantic attempt to survive the infected horde, the group made it to the church with relative ease. It looked like as if it was set up right at the onset of the outbreak, being heavily reinforced with walls and barbed wire on top of the already existing structure. But by the looks of it, it was probably abandoned before ever being used, most likely due to the quarantine zone evacuations. The sun was setting outside as the group walked up the stairs, into the small fortress that was the church. Joel closed and locked the doors behind them, and Henry sat down at the floor, breathing out as if he could finally relax. He asked Sam if he could organize and keep track of all the food they had left. Seeming somewhat off, Sam agreed and took a bunch of cans with him and went into a separate room. Feeling tired, Joel sat down a few feet away from Henry and said something jokingly about what a day they'd had. Ellie asked if she could go after Sam and talk to him a bit, and Henry thought it sounded like a good idea. After sitting down for a while, Joel and Henry gathered some wood and debris and started a small campfire. Joel could hear Ellie and Sam having some sort of discussion about the infected, but not really what. He and Henry continued sharing stories like they'd done at the train station for a few hours, until it was time for everyone to sleep. Joel woke up some hours later. Henry was already up boiling some water of the campfire to make it safe for drinking. The sun hadn't risen yet, so it was still quite dark. Henry said he had let the kids sleep in for once. Anxious to get out of the Pittsburgh area after so many months of being stuck, Joel decided that there was no time for such things. So he went over to where Ellie was sleeping and woke her up. Henry said over his shoulder that Ellie should go wake up Sam and get him to help out with making breakfast.
Well, if you want him to join us, you can go wake his ass up.
Ellie sleepily obliged and went over to the little room which Sam had converted into a temporary food storage the night before. Joel turned around to say something to Henry, but was interrupted by Ellie, screaming and being thrown to the floor by Sam.
Sam! The hell?
He was infected. He ran over to the duffel bag to get a gun, but a shot went off and hit the floor just beside him.
That's my fucking brother!
He looked at Henry, who had his gun trained on him. Joel, not going to let Ellie die over an infected, said, "Screw it," and opened the bag anyways. But before he could even get a chance to aim at poor Sam, Henry himself. Ellie pushed the body off of her and quickly backed up. Sobbing and hyperventilating, Henry looked at the body of his brother. Joel recognized shock anywhere and realized he had to disarm Henry before he did anything drastic. Slowly, he approached Henry and told him he was going to take his gun.
I'm gonna get that gun from you, okay?
But Henry backed up and angrily screamed at Joel that this was all his fault.
It's all your fault!
Aiming his gun at him. Joel stopped walking and was about to try to talk Henry into giving him the gun, but Henry just closed his eyes and put it toward the side of his own head and fired. So, even though this is not really the end of the summer season, I wanted to cut it here because, well, like in the game, after this it cuts to a completely different area and some time later. And I guess it's kinda hard to do a smooth transition from someone shooting themselves. Moving on, like with some of the other discussion segments, I do want to mention that I wasn't able to read some of this stuff, specifically due to the pixelation. This time it was only this post-it note. I can see that it reads abandoned church and then barricade/defenses. But that third line I just can't make out. Someone make sure to tell me what you think it says in the comments down below. Anyways, let's talk about the elephant in the room for this sequence. And that is that they ride a freaking train. Now, if done right, something like that doesn't have to be out of tone and ridiculous in a setting like this, as proven by Telltale's, rest in peace, The Walking Dead Season 1, in which Lee and his group do find a working train and ride all the way from some random rural road crossing to Savannah. Honestly, that was the only thing I could think of when I first saw this, and to be honest, The Last of Us launching in 2013 and The Walking Dead in 2012, it almost seems like they might have taken a page from Telltale's book, though it's probably completely coincidental though, since this board is most likely from early development before The Walking Dead even launched. Anyways, I think the reason why the train or anything like it did not make it into the game in the end is because they decided it didn't fit the tone. And I think that because of what we hear them talk about in the Grounded documentary, that it was quite hard to really nail down what was too explosive and too actiony in comparison to Uncharted, where a scene like this is not all that strange. The train here isn't the only thing over the top during the timeline though. Jumping forward, we can see a quote-unquote RPG sequence or the previous river chase. While those things might fit in an Uncharted type game, and if done right, in a more darker and less explosive game like The Last of Us, I'm really glad they ended up toning it down and making it more down to earth. I mean, if I think about Uncharted, I think about intense, fast-paced action sequences, like the train crash in Uncharted 2, or the car chase and explosive ship graveyards in Uncharted 4. It's fun, over-the-top excitement. But if I think about The Last of Us, I think of Joel and Ellie. All that action and over-the-topness might be a lot of in-the-moment fun, but in the end, it'd divert attention away from what the game really is about. Other than the train though, this sequence is pretty much the same as what we got in the actual game. Leave the Pittsburgh area, Sam, presumably since it isn't concretely stated, gets infected in the overgrown Suburbs area, and the group ends up finally reaching their destination. In this case, a church and not a radio tower. And of course it all tragically ends with Sam turning and Henry shooting himself. But that's pretty much it for this segment. And that's fitting, because this also happens to be it for this episode. Do you agree or disagree with any of my discussion points? What do you make of Naughty Dog potentially planning to have a train ride in the game at some point? Do you think it was a good idea to cut it, or would it have been better if it had remained in the game? Do you think I did a decent enough job of recreating the story from the board and filling out the blanks? Tell me in the comments down below and let's discuss it. And until next time, have a great day.